Greetings and welcome to City Lights Live, the online edition of the City Lights events calendar. I'm your host, Peter Maravellis. On Tuesday, February the 3rd in 2026, City Lights had the pleasure of hosting Ralph Remington in celebration of his new book, Penetrating Whiteness, How White Supremacy Built America. It's published by Books That Save Lives, and it's a powerful and timely collection of essays offering piercing insights into the realities of racism, sexism, homophobia, and the reactionary politics that so permeate the American landscape. Penetrating Whiteness boldly confronts the uncomfortable truths about the persisting toxicity of white supremacy and systemic discrimination. Ralph Remington was in conversation with Ted Russell on this evening in a very spirited discussion. Ralph Remington is a multidisciplinary artistic leader and community builder, theater director, essayist, actor, writer, and former American politician. Ralph was appointed by Mayor London Breed as Director of Cultural Affairs for the San Francisco Arts Commission and the City and County of San Francisco in January 2021. Ralph is the former Deputy Director for Arts and Culture for the City of Tempe, Arizona. He also had artistic responsibility for the Tempe Center for the Arts as artistic director. He is the former Western Regional Director and Assistant Executive Director of Actors Equity Association. So he was in conversation with Ted Russell, who is a nonprofit arts management consultant, strategist, and facilitator. As a consultant, he focuses on arts advocacy, board training, planning, research, strategy, and coaching. Previously, he'd served as Director of Arts and Strategy and Ventures for the Kenneth Reinin Foundation, where he led the foundation's strategic direction for the arts. He's also served as Senior Program Officer for the Arts Program at James Irvine Foundation and was named a Nasher Hemesiger Fellow at SMU Data Arts and the National Center for Arts and Research, where he serves as an intellectual partner in the SMU Data Arts Leadership on Critical Issues. It is such a great honor to have had both of them with us on that evening. We hope you'll enjoy their conversation.
And so when whiteness penetrated our culture in Africa, let's say, originally, and then that changed the very nature of Africa and African people. Then when we were brought over, then when we entered America, or the land that would be America, we actually penetrated that system, and we brought all the things that we brought with us, whether it was jazz, rock and roll, blues, or hip hop, country, yams, collard greens, watermelon, all those things we brought with us, and we penetrated the culture that is America. Mm-hmm. So we bump and burrow into each other, and out of that, even though some of that is violent and a lot of it is horrid, that out of that comes something else. And so what does that leave us with, and how do we examine that, and how do we deal with that act of penetration? How do you deal with a lover after you've been fucked?
Don't drop the mic yet. That was a mic drop. So we're gonna keep talking. So that cultural piece, I just wanted to get in because there's so many layers to it. And I feel like if people don't even get beyond the title with their own impression of it, they're not going to see what's going on here. For me, being born in 1963, I just found out that Elizabeth was also born in 1963. We've seen these layers and these eras, and we've seen the winds of civil rights, various types of civil rights, but really begun with our civil rights movement. We've seen all these things that have happened that have echoed to today. But for me, it was fascinating to have you in the various moments of these decades just talk about it. Talk about where Trump was before it, the moments of evolution, to talk about Bernie, Hillary, Elizabeth Warren, and these different things. And what I love is to hear the depth of your political response, some of which seem to be responding to folks who might be online, might be just folks in person saying really not even just unintelligent things, but poorly informed opinions that you are countering in depth, and yet your own opinion evolves with the political moments of what's happening. Can you just talk about some of that broad view of how you've seen these last few campaigns, or maybe even that interior aspect of how you consider the political world and how do you even bring so much depth to your analysis because you do spend some time critiquing the people who don't bring the analysis.
True. I think, well, as you see, and what I put left in the book was that, you see me swaying, you see my political point of view evolving in the book. There are times when I love Bernie and times when I can't stand Bernie. And there are times when I critique, the Clintons or critique the moment and critique, I guess, what you might call corporate Democrats. But also times when I feel that they're necessary. And I think just to pause on that for a moment, I think that the moment we find ourselves in, we probably wouldn't be in this moment if Bernie weren't ever on the scene. And I know that's going to make a lot of people probably piss a lot of people off, but
well, some of what you write in this book will piss some people off. And guess what? Y'all should read it.
And I'll preface that to say that my actual core politics are probably Bernie's politics and AOC's politics. That's my core. That's what I really firmly believe in. But I believe at the time when Hillary was making her run and Bernie was coming so hard at her and stayed in and stayed in and went hard. And then Comey, of course, played batted cleanup at the end and
right.
email situation and all that. And when Comey came in and knocked her down, finally, that's when she lost the campaign. But Bernie had beat her up nice and good. He tenderized her like a steak.
And some of the things he said, right? And how he stayed in it.
How he stayed in it, right?
When he knew he couldn't win it.
He knew he couldn't win it. He knew he couldn't win it. And so he played a spoiler. And then you even had Hollywood celebrities like Susan Sarandon saying, well, maybe we need to get our asses kicked just to feel what that feels like and then go through it. And then we'll be even more revolutionary than we were before. And it's like, come on, how naive can you be? I mean, really? And so Hillary, that was our shot, right? If Hillary had followed up Obama and Hillary would have been in, we would have never had Joe and we would have went on and on and on. I think we were on a run.
Right. And the Supreme Court factor.
And the Supreme Court factor. Absolutely. And so we would have stacked the court in a way that would have looked more like America, felt more like America, been more American than our total ideals, not conservative America. And so what ended up happening was the travesty that we find ourselves in today. And I think that a lot of that is Bernie's fault. And I think even though Bernie's in there fighting the good fight for himself, it's not only Bernie's fault, but it's the fault of the electorate for being naive enough to believe that even though Bernie wasn't going to win, we're still going to make her feel it. And making her feel it was making all of us feel it. And so we ended up where we are, and we got Trump. And we know what that was like. And then we got Trump again. And I would blame that part really on Biden, because Biden, he should have dropped out probably a year before. And
at least,
and handed it over to Kamala. Kamala would have had a good run as the president. And then Kamala would have been running as a sitting president and she would have won it. But there was no strategy. I don't know where Obama was. He was absent, being a celebrity. I don't know what happened, but Obama was kind of not there. So
plus he had the Joe relationship, so he had to be careful about that.
Absolutely, right. All of that, right? And so he didn't want to piss Joe off. He didn't want to piss the establishment Democrats off. And Kamala was sitting right there, and she was teed up, and they just didn't play it right. And Joe got caught up in his own ego because he always wanted to be president from the time he was like 5 years old, probably.
Almost as long as I can remember, not quite, but still, it seemed like Joe Biden was there, right? And wanted to be president,
right?
And he got it in his own way.
That's right. It's all the way around, so no one can blame any one of them. Certainly Bernie was at fault, but Biden was at fault, Obama was at fault. All of these people were at fault that bring us to where we are now, but there were no adults. It seemed that there were no adults at the table to navigate the conversation.
So deep. Just to touch on Kamala for a second, because you do have that connection, and there is so much in here that's about culture. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about that relationship in Mecca and just, being on campus with Kamala and knowing, because you even reflected the moment where Trump tried to pull out that BS, like, oh, she was Indian, right? All that.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's so crazy. And anybody that knows Black culture, first of all, I'll say so. I went to Howard University, and I graduated in 1984, and I was on campus the same time Kamala was. I used to see her on campus, saw her, her AKA garb and doing her thing, and she dated some guys I knew and whatnot. But
Yeah.
but I mean, we didn't know each other. We weren't friends, but I knew her, right? I knew of her. I saw her around. And so we had the same influences. I guess I was a senior. I was an upperclassman, and she was a lowerclassman, and or underclassman. And she was, I think, you know, at Howard, you can see the whole diaspora, right? So you can see Black people that looked like white people and had blue eyes or green eyes, but they were Black. A lot of times from New Orleans or those kinds of places or other spots, but they were Black because we encompassed the entire spectrum. So there were vanilla Black people. My mom was one of them. My mom looked like a white woman. So there were those folks, and then there were Black folks that were as dark as Michael Jordan or darker, right?
A lot of people actually still need this education today just because of the way the media portrays us.
Portrays us. So the black people, they're no pure. When we say African Americans, that term is almost a misnomer because they're no pure African American. African American is a unique thing. Like in my own genealogy, I'm like 46% European, right? And
I'm American Indian and European. I mean, right?
I have no white parent, right?
Yeah.
So I'm 46% European, almost half white with no white parent, right? So that tells you a lot about the diaspora. And so it's and white folks don't understand it. They see Black. So it's like when you are coming after me, you're coming after yourself because I'm a part of you too. Aren't we probably share some of the same ancestry, some of the same relatives, I'm a quarter Irish. I mean, Irish people wouldn't say that if they're trying to chase me down the streets of Philadelphia and call me a nigga. Then they don't see that I'm a quarter Irish. They don't see that I'm an Irish person just like they are. They're probably quarter Irish, quarter German, but they don't see that, right?
You might be just as Irish as they are.
Exactly.
That's deep.
I mean,
that's deep. But the mixed race phenomenon is huge. And then I remember the data that came out of Ohio State University that for everyone whose genealogy goes back to the 19th century, if your family was here, it's a 70% chance that you are mixed, right? So that goes for the white folks too, who are part Native, part Black. And so if we really break it down, like this is not just a melting pot, but it really is a mixed race country for all those folks who have that longer lineage.
That's right.
I did, just because you have so much culture in the book, and that's part of why it took me back, just the musical references in the poetry, but all kinds of places. Just all those references you had in the one poem, like "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" A lot of pieces. But what I wanted to get into is that leaping off that you had culturally at Howard, and it was the musician named Prince, who obviously was influential, and not to guide you on that, but that's obviously where you got turned on to Prince, and then one of the best concerts you ever saw, and influenced where you live. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about the Purple One, especially since Minnesota is also of the moment.
My place. I'm from West Philadelphia, but moved to Minneapolis probably when I was my late 20s. And Minneapolis to me is my adopted home. And a lot of I remember when I wanted to move there, my mom said to me, "Why you want to move to Minneapolis? There's nothing there but white folks and corn." I said, "But Prince lives there."
Hell yeah.
And I follow Prince all over town. I know there's an essay, there was an essay, a long essay that was in the book on Prince called One of a Kind. And we didn't include it in the volume, but we're going to include it in some bonus material. because we didn't really have rights to do the lyrics that were in that essay, and so we don't. Nobody wants to get sued. so, so that's. But I mean, the essay is actually one of my personal favorites because it was a homage to Prince and Minneapolis after he died. And I was there when he died, and I chased Prince all over town. I mean, I would see him at the hole in the walls. He would come. There was this hole in the wall called Bunkers, and he would come there at like after midnight, and he'd play, get on stage like a little dive, right, a little dive bar. And one night, he and Dougie Fresh got on stage, and Dougie Fresh was beatboxing, and Prince was like playing guitar and singing. Right, this is the kind of stuff that he would do. And you see him all over town at First Avenue, of course, that's in Purple Rain, made famous by that. But you see him at little hole in the walls. You see him at clubs he pop up at clubs all over town. And then he opened up Paisley Park as his own personal club. And then people would come there and he'd get on stage at 12 or 2 o'clock in the morning and play till the sun came up. Everything from cover tunes to hardcore rock and roll to all his greatest hits to Hendrix all night. He would do it all, and you couldn't believe what you were experiencing. And then one of my personal, and I talked to him a number of times, talked to him in the club, and he knew me from around town because he liked these posters that I was artistic director of Pillsbury House Theater that
Founder, right?
I founded Pillsbury House Theater in Minneapolis, and I was doing Amiri Baraka's Dutchman at the time, and I was on the poster with the woman that played Lula, and she was licking the side of my head, and I said, one night we were in Bunkers, the hole in the wall, and I said, brother, I really dig your work. He said, yeah, I dig your work too. I especially dig them posters.
I just love that, man. I just love that. The cultural side is so deep, and I did reference that poem where, you end up going to Amsterdam on a one-way ticket. Is that part of the story? Plus, you were there, like serving our country in Germany. So maybe I just want you to bring in some of that European aspect because as a black man it just seemed like it was really important, and I've actually just experienced small slices of being in Mexico and let my body relax from that whole American black experience, which has so much weight on it. So please just break down any aspect of
Oh
that.
man, well, in the book you'll see there are a number of poems and essays where I refer to my time in Europe originally. And I went to Europe, I was born in Philadelphia, one of the 13 original slave colonies. And there in Philly, you grew up at the time. I hate Philadelphia, by the way. When I say I'm from Philadelphia,
No one is snapping, no one's clapping.
like I hate Philadelphia. It was actually cooler than it used to be. But at the time when I grew up, you felt invisible as a black person in Philadelphia. You were just under you. It was very clear that you were in a caste and you were at the bottom of that caste system. And
And the mayor was part of the whole
Frank
gangster
Rizzo,
action.
yes, absolutely. Mayor Frank Rizzo. Look him up on Wikipedia. You'll see. And for those of you not old enough to remember, but when I went into the army, one of the draws from going into the army, for me was that I got a chance to escape the United States. And they said, you can go anywhere you want to go. And they said, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to Europe. And he said, great, we'll put you in Europe. So they sent me to Frankfurt, Germany. And, Germany of all places, right? And that's the history that Germany has, but Germany has dealt with its history. You don't see swastikas and Nazi flags flying around like you see Confederate flags flying around in the United States of America. That's outlawed. You can't do any of that shit. So I got to Germany and I felt like for the first time, I felt free. And I felt this is what it must feel like to be white for the first time. And I thought, is this what it feels like to be white? Where like you walk in a store and nobody's following you around. You stick up your hand for a cab and they're not passing you by. They stop right there when you stick it up. You're not, they're not, when you're talking to somebody in a conversation, they're not looking for the nearest white person to direct the conversation to and not looking you in your eye. This was what it feels like to be a person, a human being.
Yes. Yes. Right.
And I almost never came back. And the only reason why I came back was I wanted to give this arts thing a go. in America, and I wanted to see how far that could take me. And I also got sucked in by the casino of making it being a movie star or a TV star and all
Okay.
that kind of shit, right?
Okay.
That's the drug America plies you with. Come to the casino, keep getting the hit, keep getting the
Right.
hit,
And every once in a while, you like it hits your spot, your number,
Yeah,
whatever. So you get a little bit. Yeah.
right. During that time, keep in mind there were only three stations on television: NBC, ABC, and CBS. There wasn't 500 channels or more like they have now.
Mhm.
So there were only three stations, and I remember you and I all remember the time when you didn't see black people on TV, and so when a black person showed up on TV, it's like, "Hey, black person on TV!" And you call the whole neighborhood, and everybody would run to the TV to see a black person on TV. Just any old black person, a dance on the Jackie Gleason show, whatever. It didn't matter. You were seeing representation. That's how important it was,
Hmm.
and that's the
Hmm.
America that I grew up in.
So deep. So deep. Man, I feel like there's so much, and I want to honor our time. So maybe just hitting some of the personal stuff. Here we are in this great art city, San Francisco, but I feel like as you talked about some of the experiences, some of it just hit home for me, having worked in the arts for years in philanthropy. And when you literally talked about your experiences of discrimination, how that had impacted you in all these positions, but then in the League of Regional Theater world, the LORT world, like you had like very particular incident, not to mention all the things you talk about from being a child and just all the racism where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people assume that that doesn't happen to people, and we can both say it happens all the time. So I don't know. For me, like maybe you can just talk some about since we
The
are
theater world.
here. Yeah, please go ahead and break it down a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, I have a good story about the theater, right? And so I was at this theater. I should name the theater, but I'm not going to. I should do it. But it's a theater in the northeast in the northeast Lord Theater in the Boston area, and they want an artistic director. And long story short, it was down to me and a white guy, well-known white guy, who's he was fine, he was a perfectly fine guy and artist. And we weren't in the room at the same time, so they had us at this museum with their board, and it's the final interview. And it was down to us, and he would come in another time. This is mine. So in this one, it was like a forum. So they asked you questions, and you had to answer the questions. But anybody would throw out a question, you had to
It's
answer.
a heavy duty interview
Yeah,
just to be at that level, right? You've
yeah,
got a
yeah.
room full of board
One
members.
full board members, right?
Okay.
And they were all white, and there was one person of color there. And so I was answering the questions, and they were clapping, and I was like, and after this time, I had already been a politician, so I knew how to do this. I'd been a Minneapolis City Council member, and so I knew how to do this kind of exercise. And so they were clapping, saying, I was like, man, I'm hitting this thing. And then finally, this guy, this Ichabod Crane looking motherfucker, stood up. He was about 80 years old. and, he stood up and this is a very, and he was one of their wealthiest donors. And I think he was the wealthiest donor.
Uh-oh.
And he stood up.
Uh-oh.
He says, this is a bad question. I shouldn't even ask this question. This is a really bad question. I shouldn't ask this question. But look around this room. One of these things is not like the others. We're white and you're black. What do you have to say about that? This is at an interview. And I could have sued the fuck out of him, right? But
In an industry,
in it, pun intended,
right?
and so I answered the question. I finessed, I said it will actually be an anomaly if it were the other way around, right? Like this is usual. I mean, usual for me. This is
Yes.
the world I live in, right? And as a
Ah,
professional theater artist at this level, and then he's like, sat down, and then his wife stood up, and his wife says, "I have a question. I've looked at your resume,
And you're so dynamic and you're so charismatic and you've done this and you've done that.
Now, all these things should be a compliment, right? But it weren't, right?
You're so charismatic and you've done this and you've done that. And we love Elizabeth Kegley,
Who's their managing director, their partner with the art, who would be their partner with the artistic director.
and we love Elizabeth Kegley. How can you assure us that you won't dominate her?
So no one stood up, and then the woman, that she spoke about, she stood up and said, "Hey, Ralph and I have known each other a long time. We'll be fine."
That's
Blah,
beautiful.
blah. She did it, but none of the board members stepped in. Nobody stopped it. Nobody. And so I knew at that point that I was not getting that job. I was not getting, and why would I want it, right? And so, but I could have got rich off of that,
Right.
because they were breaking every civil rights law there is,
Hello.
right? But you can't do it, because then I would have rendered myself unemployable. So the very laws that were meant to protect us are used against us. We can't even use them. So why do they even exist?
And there is so much in the book the subtle, but the way you repeat it, that talks about like calling out racism. Part of what white supremacy does, white dominant culture, is ensure that you will pay the price for pointing it out.
That's right. That's exactly right. You will pay the price. Get back, nigga. Get back.
Right.
That's what it is.
Ooh, well, I want to make sure we take it back to Minneapolis, just given the moment, what's happening, how you must be so proud as someone, right, who has so many people there, but
Yeah.
maybe you can just reflect. Once again, there's so much in the book about your times there, all you experienced.
Yeah.
So from Pillsbury House being in the neighborhood where George Floyd was murdered, to your time, even to your first day coming to city council, there's so much in the book that relates to this moment that you should really start reading the book right away. Right now, it's just happening. I would just recommend it for everyone. It's so timely. But what would you like to reflect on about Minneapolis, those times, this time, whatever? I mean, it's your book, man.
Yeah.
So please break it down for us.
Question. I mean, it's a really thoughtful question. I love Minneapolis, my heart and soul. It's my favorite city in the United States of America. I love it to death. I don't think I could love a place any more than I love Minneapolis and the Twin Cities itself. So I really don't. And so that being said, and I would say Minnesota. Before I get to Minneapolis, I'll say Minnesota was the only place in my life, upstate Minnesota, where I was refused food service because I was with a white woman.
Whoa.
Right. And that's the first time I felt like I was like, oh shit, this is like I'm back in, 1955. And so upstate Minnesota is very different than the Twin Cities. Even though I love it all, but upstate is very different. Like a friend once said to me, you get outside of the major cities, it's all Alabama. Right. If you get outside the major city anywhere, it's all Alabama.
Right. You can love some Atlanta, a chocolate city, but
exactly. But outside, if you get to Montgomery, even it's a little different. And so I would say that Minneapolis, the situation that exists there now, and ICE notwithstanding, but certainly the George Floyd situation, that was brewing and bubbling for a long time. And when I was on city council, I was screaming it from the rafters that the systemic racism that was happening to Black people in that city was intolerable and not sustainable. And they didn't listen to me. And I was on city council. I was a city council member at the time. I had and I talk about this in the book, I had police threaten to kill me to my face, invite me to a meeting, and tell me, if you don't do what we'd like you to do, and you keep talking about us in the way you're talking about us, we will eliminate you. And I said, well, I don't care if you don't back me again for election. Oh, no. We will eliminate you. And if that's
crazy,
chill.
But now we know that they actually mean this stuff. They've been executing people.
And so George Floyd executed right in the streets of Minneapolis. That that philosophy. I mean, there was even a biker gang in the Minneapolis, in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area that was composed of cops, and they were white supremacist. It was a white supremacist biker gang that they all wore colors and stuff, off duty time. They hung out. I mean, so this stuff is deep, right? Very
Yeah.
deep. And so even though Minneapolis is a cultural kind of wonderland, it's multi-culti wonderland in a way that you see in Purple Rain in many cases. Because I mean, there's a lot of blacks and whites in the same family. It's a whole different experience than being on the East Coast where everything is so racially stratified, so racially marginalized. And so so that moment is what really crystallized for me, like that this was a place that was, while it was great in a lot of ways, here I am, a sitting city council member, and the police can threaten to kill me to my face. And there's not a damn thing I could do. So what I did was I called the community activists, and I said, the thing I can do is shine a spotlight on this thing. So if anything does happen to me, they know where to look.
Ooh, I mean, that's some serious service just to do that type of work. You also describe in the book like some of how some of those leaders, some of those most racist leaders in the police are part of the problem now, how they've ascended in that time since you were there. Because when were you on the city council?
I was there 2006 to
Yeah.
2010, 2009. It's 4 years.
So
Yep.
part of what we see happening, what evolved, obviously with
Yep.
George Floyd, everything is an extension, and yet I would love to hear more about what 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 are the roots, what are the elements in this Minneapolis community that have brought out this strength. You know it, you love this community. How and why is this happening? Because you might only expect it some other place. For a lot of people, they're like, oh, they don't get it, but this
Yeah.
is part of who these people are. So break it down.
Minnesotans are some of the best people in the world because they're hardy. They go through long, hard winters. They help each other out. I mean, it's the friendliest place. When I moved there in September of '91, that Halloween it snowed 36 inches. And then 2 weeks later, it snowed another 17 inches. And then it snowed a little bit every day that whole winter. So the snowbanks on the street, each side of the street, were high as this. But people help each other. They get out of cars, they push you out, they shovel you out. It's no like every person for themselves, and they didn't care whether you're white, black, otherwise. They were just like, "Hey, you're my neighbor. I'm helping you out." I used to walk down the street, and when I was brand new in Minneapolis, and I hear a house party, and I didn't know anybody, so I go up to the door and I introduce myself to the host, and they'd invite me in, and all of a sudden I'm meeting a whole new group of friends. I mean, that's the way it was. That's the way it was during that time. And I think now it's gotten hardened because of Trump and the atmosphere, but there's still a core group, particularly in the Twin Cities, that are progressive. Progressive people. Keep in mind that the Democratic Party there is called the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. There's a reason for that because they're entrenched in farm and labor politics. They are about progressive politics, not about corporate politics. That's the way Minnesota has always been. And so they're good people. And they're learned people. They study, they know shit. They don't just like get their stuff from TV or TikTok. They read books, they go to lectures, if it's a night, that's snowy and cold, 20 degrees below zero, they'll go out to McAllister and go hear Cornell West, or they'll go hear Chomsky, or they'll go hear folks that they'll, instead of spending in other places in the country, they might like be sitting in front of the TV all night until they go to bed. They're going to go out and they're going to see stuff, and they're going to learn things, and they're going to share that information with their neighbor. And that's what Minnesota is. That's what Minneapolis is. And that's why I love them so damn much. And I want to be with them. I can't wait to be with them tomorrow.
Woo! Yes. Next stop.
Yeah.
Man, all right. Thank you for bringing on that vividness. It's so powerful to hear about it. Some of the aspects of the politics, obviously, I don't even want to get into the White House, and yet it's obviously a theme in the book. Some of what you talked about to me that was so deep were all the aspects through the first term, and the things that were coming up, the things that were obvious, and you did refer a couple times to this cold civil war, right? And aspects. Maybe you could just even refer to some of that aspects, and you relate to how, like, if they had properly, maybe how the Germans recognized the Nazis and ended the Civil War the proper way in the United States, it wouldn't have come back. So I don't know whether you want to get into Trump, the electoral college, whether you want to refer to the cold Civil War and how it's getting hot.
Yeah.
But I mean, all of that, I almost don't want to speak it in this beautiful moment, and yet it's so much of what's happening, and it's a lot of what you've been looking at and
Yeah.
talking about. So please talk about it, man.
It's a bad time. It's a bad time. And I've never seen, when I say I'm speaking to the choir, we've never seen a time like this in our lifetimes. I don't care, how old you are, you've never seen this. And it's almost like there was a politician, the younger folks probably wouldn't remember, but George Wallace, he was running for president, and then he got shot and paralyzed, and he found religion, and then started liking black people. But before then, he was really a virulent racist and
Hardline, yeah.
hardline racist. And if he had become president during that time, it would have been horrible. But I can't even imagine that being any different than what we are going through right now. Like I hated Reagan with a passion. I couldn't stand that motherfucker. I mean, Reagan, Nixon, George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, they're all awful. A whole rogues gallery full of awful. I'd take any one of them today over this motherfucker that's in the White House right now. I mean, I would take any one of them.
Yes.
And
Truth.
so I just, and what does that say? How far have we moved off the dime of who we are as Americans, as people, that we accept a 34 count felon as the president of the United States, a person that can't even get a corporate job? We put in the highest office in the land and think that a criminal ain't going to crime? A gangster going to gangster. That's what they do, right? It's like a snake gonna bite. That's what it does. You can't get the snake because he bit, because that's what the snake does.
Right.
If you look at the snake wrong, you step on the snake, or you go close enough to the snake's gonna bite. Gangster gonna gangster. And that's who Trump is. And so how did we let that happen? And the founders never would have imagined letting a criminal, convicted criminal, not, this isn't even hyperbole, it's real. It's like Onion headline. Criminal, straight criminal, adjudicated rapist, a criminal, 34 count felonious criminal that has a whole list of other crimes. And then now you have this Epstein files, and you have all the things that are in the Epstein files, that he's running around with a pedophile for years, a convicted pedophile,
right,
with little girls and boys. I mean, what have we become? I mean, there's not much I can say other than that. And I do want to read one piece before we finish.
Yes.
But I just want to say there's not much more I can say. I mean, the essays speak to a lot of that, and you'll see the nuance, that the mechanics of how I break things down in the book, the past and the present and the future. But I don't think I can articulate it any better than I just did right now, about the state that we find ourselves, that someone who's the president of the United States, who couldn't even get a job at a Target with his record.
Couldn't rent an apartment.
Boom.
Nope.
Boom, boom, boom. And you do refer to all the politeness of white supremacy that allows it, being civil, to pave that path.
Right.
So,
our marriage to etiquette killed us.
So it's deep. But let's get into some more poetry. I think that's a good way for us to ride out of here.
Sure.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this piece. It's a piece about my dad. My dad is inspired by my dad. My dad was, probably my biggest inspiration. Um, and he passed away in 2019. He was 80 years old. And he was the first person that taught me how to take up space. And I would, there's no me without him. I mean, biologically, of course, but spiritually and soulfully. So this is inspired by him, and the rest you can figure out. This is called Freedom from Being Black. As many of you know, my father passed away earlier this year at 80 years old. And as tough as that was and is, it has provided me with a bit of perspective. He was a bold thinker and artist who laid the path that I've tried to follow. The one thing that I think about over and over again is that he is finally free from being Black. And now he knows the answers to everything. Now, that may sound like an odd thing to say, for I am as proud of being Black as any Black person could be from a cultural perspective, an unapologetic card-carrying member of the African diaspora. But the Blackness that I'm speaking about is from a pejorative perspective. To be Black in this world, in this country, is to bear the burden of criminality and villainy for the entire human species. Black has been used as a word for denigration for our entire lives. It's a Black day, a bad day. She's in a dark or black mood, a bad mood. Call a spade a spade. Even in the game of pool, the white ball is used to knock all of the balls of color off the table, and the game is finally won when the white ball knocks the black 8 ball clean off the table, leaving the white cue ball the lone victor standing. I was in Minnesota, my favorite state in the nation this summer, attending an Americans for the Arts conference in Minneapolis. I stayed at the Hilton Hotel during the conference. Afterwards, I stayed at the airport Super 8 in Bloomington for a couple of nights before my flight back to Arizona. When I checked into the Super 8, I asked the desk manager if they were holding funds on my credit card because I thought that I overheard her telling that to another guest. She looked at me as if I stole something and barked, "Read the sign." I said, "Excuse me, have I done something wrong?" Then in short order, she told me that she was calling the police. She called the police. I had already paid my bill in advance, and she commenced to telling them that a Black man was inappropriately recording her. I was recording because Hotel Becky decided to send a brother to jail simply for asking a question while checking into a motel. Long story short, Becky didn't want to go on the internet, and I didn't want the drama, so I de-escalated the situation, and Becky apologized. That trauma, however, still lives somewhere inside of me. My father is free from all of that shit. My father is free of the burden of driving down a street and seeing a car pull behind him with headlights off, riding on his bumper, and all of a sudden the headlights are turned on along with flashing blue and red lights. My father is free from store clerks running up to him urgently as if in an emergency to ask if he needs help simply out of fear that he may steal something. My father is free from wondering if he didn't get a job because he is Black. My father is free from suppressing his rage when white folks roll their eyes in meetings and ridicule him with their silence simply because they disagreed with him, or maybe just because he attempted to be present. My father is free from being talked over and ignored in conversation, and even if he poses a question to a white person, having that white person deliver the answer to the nearest white person in the vicinity without even giving him the respect of looking him in the eye. My father is free from educating people about race who, in any event, have all the knowledge that they'd ever want on the internet if they even gave a fuck. And let's be honest, the education isn't really about race. It's about whiteness and the construct of white supremacy in the United States of America. My father is free from worrying about making white folks feel guilty simply because he's in the room with them. My father is free from having to check his anger. My father is free from representing every single Black person who has ever been born. My father is free from having to check his grammar. My father is free from monitoring his tone. My father is free from having to explain himself. My father is free from current and epigenetic trauma. My father is free from historical pain. My father doesn't have to worry about white racial comfort. My father is free from being constricted, restricted, constrained, watered down, patronized, abused, misused, and misunderstood. As E. E. Cummings once wrote, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you like everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. I don't know how we all ended up in this place together, and I certainly don't know how this thing's going to end. But what I do know is that as a Black man and as a human being, I try to embrace life fully each and every day. I hope that I will leave this world a little better than I found it. And at the same time, I can't wait for this hell to end, because on that day, at that moment, I too will finally know what it is to be free.
All right.
Share that.
Great.
But we've got a question from online already.
Oh, awesome.
Hey, Jared
Mm.
says, in 1967, Kwame Ture published an essay called The Myth of Coalition, in which he described white people's difficulty with supporting Black-led movements. And I feel that we're experiencing that again in this post-2020 climate in which non-Black people denied Kamala Harris an opportunity to lead the nation. Do you believe white people's allegiance to whiteness can be dismantled or overcome?
Great question. Again, I always preface to say this is going to be controversial, but everything I say is probably controversial. I think the key to that is white women. I think white women are the key to disrupting white supremacy. And that white women have consistently been the gardeners of white supremacy. They're in the PTA meetings, they're in the school meetings, they're in the city council meetings, they're at the junior league. They're the key. And the moment that white women en masse start to see themselves as part of the marginalized and disenfranchised, they'll talk that feminist shit all day and night until it comes to, are they down with Black and brown people or down with the husband at home or the brother or the father? And they always side with the latter more often than not. And so that's what I think the key to it is white women helping to disrupt the system.
I'm going to add to that. The movie Melania. You're 1,000% right. The movie Melania that came out, the number one segment that saw it were older white women. That was the biggest by far segment.
Wow.
Middle-aged white women are like a huge part of the protest scene in Minneapolis right now. I don't know if you know that, but it's a huge turnout, right? The Women's March in Minneapolis is huge.
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes. But we see in the voter rolls that even white women didn't vote for Hillary. And so, here a white woman, middle-aged, middle if you're going to live to be 120, but or older. It's not really middle-aged the way we throw the term middle-age around. But an older white woman, and white women did not vote for her. And in fact, I talk about this in the book, that white people have not voted for Democrats since Eisenhower, and it's more Black and brown people that are holding the Democratic Party up. If Black and brown people bolted from the Democratic Party tomorrow, the Democratic Party wouldn't exist. And that happened, over time. The Dixiecrats, when the Civil Rights Act was brought in, then white folks bolted the Democratic Party and went to Republican Party, a lot of them. And that's what happened. And it was a payback. And that's how Reagan got in, because of the defection of Democrats. to the Republican Party, and white women were in that group. And it's all because white women don't see themselves as typically as part of the marginalized and disenfranchised. And so, yeah, we have a core group in the Democratic Party of progressive white women and moderate white women. But for the most part, most white women are down with the Republicans, and that's got to change.
Let's okay, wait a minute here. Yes.
So sad to see you leave San Francisco as director of the San Francisco Art Commission. I just want to congratulate you on your tenure and all of the energy and excitement that you brought to that agency. I just really want to say that, Ralph.
Thank you, Alma.
Tenure as on the city council in Minneapolis. What was that about? What led you to? What inspired you to get involved in politics, and what do you remember fondly from that experience?
Well, I always wanted to be in politics. Probably no surprise, and I was actually going to run for the U.S. Senate. And when I went back to Minnesota, I've been living in LA, and then I went back to Minnesota for a short time. I was in LA and went back to Minnesota, and I'd seen this documentary on Paul Wellstone, and they had this thing called Camp Wellstone. Late Senator Paul Wellstone, he died. He and his wife died in a plane crash, and he's a great guy and very progressive. Look him up. Those who are too young to remember. But they started this thing called Camp Wellstone, and they had 3 tracks. They had a politician track, a campaign worker track, and I think a nonprofit worker track. And I went back to Minnesota, and I wanted to enter this training as a candidate to learn how to be a candidate. And so I went back with the idea of running for Senate. And that's the Senate seat that Al Franken eventually got, right? So and then I had my neighbors talk to me, and they said, well, you should run for, we have an open city council seat in Ward 10. You should run for that. Ward 10 is an 80% white ward. They never had a person of color that ever won that before or since. And I said, oh, damn, city council, it's the trenches. And, I mean, there's no freedom, there's no separation, you're in the Home Depot, wherever, they're going to run up to you. I got a issue. So I said, I went to a couple of city council meetings, and my wife and I attended, and just to see what it looked like and what it felt like. And I said, maybe I'll do this. Then there's an open seat. And so I went to Camp Wellstone, and I was in the same Camp Wellstone with Tim Walz. And so that's where Tim Walz and I met. Tim Walz was a high school football coach, and we were friends, and a lot of other people. There were like 10 or 12 who later became real politicians like myself that came out of that same day, that same weekend. It was a 3-day weekend. And Tim Walz was probably the most well-known because of his national rep now. And he ran for Congress. Keith Ellison was there, so like a lot of folks. And Peggy Flanagan, those of you follow, she's Native American politician in Minnesota. And I came out of that, and they said, man, you did good. You're gonna do this thing. You're gonna win. And so I went out, and they said, we'll back you. And so I learned how retail politics, knocking on doors, doing all the stuff. They taught you everything, how to do your stump speech, how to do all the things. They taught you everything in that 3-day period. And after I left, they said, you're going to win. And I sure enough got out of there, and I won. And so I started in January, and by November we had won the race. So, yeah. And I left politics because I was going to run for mayor, and our mayor decided to run for a 3rd term as a placeholder he wanted to run for governor. And so I ended up going to the National Endowment for the Arts because I was working with Obama during his campaign. Yeah. So that was it.
Is there anything you remember that was a highlight for you being on the city council?
I think there are a lot of highlights. Probably my relationships with the people, but as far as like the glamour highlight, I would say I was being elected as a delegate for Obama being the first Black president of the United States, and being there in Denver, and and being a part of that, and having, I was knocking on doors for him on my birthday, January 2nd, in the freezing cold in Iowa. And I was there the night he won Des Moines, and my wife and I were there, and we were with him, and he and Michelle earlier in the day, and then Mason City campaigned with him there, and then I told Michelle that night, I said, "You're gonna win," or that day I said, "You're gonna win." She said, "No, we're not gonna win this." I said, "No, no, no. I see the numbers. You're gonna win." She didn't think they were gonna win, and then that night when they came out on stage in Des Moines, she came down to the rope line and said, "I told you you're gonna win." She said, "You did." So yeah, so that all of that was a one of a kind experience, that I'll never forget.
Well,
Thanks.
hi.
Hi. Thank you.
The San Francisco Arts Commission,
Thank you.
and I'm a theater artist here in San Francisco, and I am really sad to see you go. And I'm a little concerned about the void in leadership and real representation for arts makers in the city of San Francisco. I'm going to be honest, I don't have a whole lot of faith in our new mayor.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if you have any words of advice or encouragement for artists in San Francisco for how to continue to advocate to keep this city from being a technocrat takeover.
Mm. Wow, that's a lot. Let me say this. I'll say that this is a very different administration than the last administration. The times that we went through, everybody took a beating during COVID, and I think we came out different people, and COVID, even though it was a short time ago, people forgot just how hard it was and how difficult it was to get people through that time. And the mayor that appointed me, Mayor London Breed, she did a Herculean task getting us through that without the numbers you saw in New York proportionately. We didn't have freezer trucks on the street of dead bodies. We didn't have that in San Francisco. That's what you had in New York. And so people forget that. And the streets were filthy, but what's going to happen when everybody's home? Then somebody's going to occupy the void, right? And they were suffering. The homeless, the unhoused, were suffering from COVID too, and they were dying. And so I think we look for easy fixes on things, and I think that people saw this new mayor that I still work with, because I don't leave my job until June 30th. So people see this new mayor as a panacea, as a cure for, if you will, for what happened before. I guess we will see, right? We will see over. He's got 4 years to do what he needs to do. I think that people, and sitting at the Arts Commission, I will say that the Arts Commission, even though they do they do have a Herculean task in what they do, but they get beat up unnecessarily a lot. And it's from people that should know better, and they don't. And they beat the Arts Commission up because they think they can and get away with it in public comment. It's actually a cowardly thing to do, because they know that you can't respond back. So you can go up there and take your shots, but you don't get any dialogue, right? And so I would say that those folks, if they really want to make change, and this is what I did as an advocate and an activist, that if I really want to make change, I take the fight to where the fight needs to be had, not to the people that are helping you. And I think that's what people need to do. Study the landscape wherever it is, learn the dynamics of power, which is these are lessons I learned as an activist. Learn the dynamics of power, and then you know how to navigate it and know where to put your energy so it doesn't become strictly performative for a camera, and it actually has impact where it needs to be directed. Yeah, Roberto. Oh, that's okay.
Thank you, Ralph. I mean, my question is really more about your thoughts about in this MAGA moment where the destruction of the public sector is going on. It not just arts and culture; it's education. So there's very little. There's an attack on the notion of public service, and what does it mean to even be an elected official, to be a director of an agency. So, how do you remedy that? What is the strategy to bring back dignity to the school teacher, to the hospital worker, to the art worker? I mean, that's sort of like the challenge I see. But your thoughts on that?
So I want to make sure I understand the question. You want to make sure that I don't know if I'm grasping what you're asking.
I just feel because I'm still in the trenches,
Mhm.
not like you.
Right.
I still am. You are too.
Right.
But the whole MAGA moment,
Mhm.
really, whether it's attacking the NEA or the Kennedy Center
Mhm.
artists, it's all about discrediting
Mhm.
and devaluing the role of the public servant.
Mhm.
An individual who commits a life of public service,
Mhm. Mhm.
whether it's an artist or
Mhm.
a school teacher.
Mhm.
So I think that
I see.
that's the
Yep, I got it.
trauma.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I just wanted to make sure I grasped it properly. I think that when I got out of elected politics, I got out when I decided not to run for mayor and to go to the NEA instead, and I learned that it was more power in that than in being an elected official, and it was more power on the outside than the inside, because sunshine laws, which exist for perfectly good reasons, but because you have sunshine laws, then you and I and Elizabeth can't get together in a room. If we were on the same city council and we were same committee, we couldn't get together because you're breaking quorum and you can't make a deal or you can't, so you can't sit down over food or a drink and say, hey, come on, you know what the people need this. Why not? You can't do it because the public has to look in. But the minute the public looks in, then it becomes performative, and then they're performing for their audience, and then it just becomes blood sport. And so I had no more interest in blood sport. I wanted to have real dialogue, real conversation, real impact. And I think it's easy to take cheap shots from the cheap seats, but it's harder to be in the arena and actually get the work done. And I think that all of MAGA exists because it's a whole party full of people that take cheap shots from the cheap seats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's easy to do that. It's hard to do the work. You campaign in what's the saying go? You campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, right? So people don't want to govern in prose. They'd rather campaign in platitudes. That's what they'd rather do.
It's hard
Yeah,
work.
it is. It is.
We are coming to the end. Is there anyone else? Yes.
So, Ralph, I was just wondering if you had plans to record the audio book because it's a great book, but you bring such like next level.
We're working on it. We're working on it. I'd love to do the audio. I know it's a lot of work, from what I hear. I mean, it's hours and hours and hours of work, and can be weeks of time. It definitely a solid week of hours and hours. And so we're working on it. We're a small publishing company, Books That Save Lives, and we're trying to figure out, navigate our way to that. But I know there's a desire to have audiobooks because a lot of people, I don't listen to audiobooks at all. And I don't put down anybody that does. I'm glad there is an audience for that. But I just love the written word on the page. I like to see the words. Helps my vocabulary, and I just love just basking in the English language on the page. So, but I definitely would love to contribute to that.
Well, Ted Russell, thank you for doing the honors tonight.
Ted.
Ralph Remington, congratulations on this wonderful achievement. And thanks to all of you for joining us. And now we will have a signing. So thank you for being here.
Awesome, brother. Thanks. Beautiful. Great. That was so great. I just felt it coming out, man. Yeah. Oh, man. It's like it's please. Oh, thank you. Well, there you go. Yes, and yes. Okay, come on. It's good.